One of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. Music is a moral law. It gives soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and charm and gaiety to life and to everything. Opinion is the medium between knowledge and ignorance. Love is a serious mental disease. Good people do not need laws to tell them to act responsibly, while bad people will find a way around the laws. The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. To be conquered by yourself is of all things most shameful and vile. Democracy is a charming form of government, full of variety and disorder, and dispensing a sort of equality to equals and unequals alike. There are two things a person should never be angry at: what they can help and what they cannot. Ignorance of all things is an evil neither terrible nor excessive, nor yet the greatest of all, but great cleverness and much learning, if they be accompanied by a bad training, are a much greater misfortune. For a man to conquer himself is the first and noblest of all victories. We are twice armed if we fight with faith. Human behavior flows from three main sources: desire, emotion, and knowledge. Dictatorship naturally rises out of democracy, and the most aggravated form of tyranny, and slavery out of the most extreme liberty. A hero is born among 100, a wise man is found among 1,000, but an accomplished one might not be found even among 100,000 men. People are like dirt. They can either nourish you and help you grow as a person, or they can stunt your growth and make you wilt and die. If a man neglects education, he walks lame to the end of his life. A good decision is based on knowledge and not on numbers. Every heart sings a song and complete until another heart whispers back. Those who wish to sing always find a song at the touch of a lover. Everyone becomes a poet. Knowledge without justice ought to be called cunning rather than wisdom. Justice in the life and conduct of the state is possible only as first it resides in the hearts and souls of the citizens. He who steals a little steals with the same, wishes he who steals much, but with less power. All men are by nature equal, made all of the same earth by one workman, and, however, we deceive ourselves, as dear unto God as the poor peasant, as the mighty prince. All the gold which is under or upon the earth is not enough to give in exchange for virtue. The direction in which education starts, a man will determine his future in life. Excess generally causes reaction and produces a change in the opposite direction, whether it be in the seasons, or in individuals, or in governments. The man who makes everything that leads to happiness depends upon himself, and not upon other men, has adopted the very best plan for living happily. This is the man of moderation, the man of manly character and of wisdom. When the tyrant has disposed of foreign enemies by conquest or treaty, and there is nothing more to fear from them, then he is always stirring up some war or other, in order that the people may require a leader. To be sure I must, and therefore I may, assume that your silence gives consent. Justice means minding one's own business, and not meddling with other men's concerns. The excessive increase of anything causes a reaction in the opposite direction. To love rightly is to love what is orderly and beautiful in an educated and disciplined way. To prefer evil to good is not in human nature, and when a man is compelled to choose one of two evils, no one will choose the greater, when he might have the less. There's a victory and defeat, the first and best of victories, the lowest and worst of defeats which each man gains or sustains at the hands not of another, but of himself. The punishment which the wise suffer who refuse to take part in the government is to live under the government of worse men. The rulers of the state are the only persons who ought to have the privilege of lying, either at home or abroad. They may be allowed to lie for the good of the state. Let parents bequeath to their children not riches, but the spirit of reverence. Apply yourself both now and in the next life without effort. You cannot be prosperous, though the land be good. You cannot have an abundant crop without cultivation. He who is of calm and happy nature will hardly feel the pressure of age, but to him who is of an opposite disposition, youth and age are equally a burden. No one ever teaches well who wants to teach, or governs well who wants to govern. No man should bring children into the world who is unwilling to persevere to the end in their nature and education. And what, Socrates, is the food of the soul? Surely, I said, knowledge is the food of the soul. No one ever teaches well who wants to teach, or governs well who wants to govern. The God of love lives in a state of need. It is a need. It is an urge. It is a homeostatic imbalance, like hunger and thirst. It's almost impossible to stamp out. The most virtuous are those who content themselves with being virtuous without seeking to appear so. For the introduction of a new kind of music must be shunned as imperiling the whole state, since styles of music are never disturbed without affecting the most important political institutions. A state arises, as I conceive, out of the needs of mankind. No one is self-sufficing, but all of us have many wants. A state arises, as I conceive, out of the needs of mankind. No one is self-sufficing, but all of us have many wants. How can you prove whether at this moment we are sleeping, and all our thoughts are a dream, or whether we are awake and talking to one another in the waking state? The highest reach of injustice is to be deemed just when you are not. No trace of slavery ought to mix with the studies of the freeborn man. No study pursued under compulsion remains rooted in the memory. Entire ignorance is not so terrible or extreme an evil, and is far from being the greatest of all. Too much cleverness and too much learning, accompanied with ill bringing up, are far more fatal. Wonder is the feeling of the philosopher, and philosophy begins in wonder. All things will be produced in superior quantity and quality, and with greater ease, when each man works at a single occupation, in accordance with his natural gifts and at the right moment, without meddling with anything else. No one knows whether death, which people fear to be the greatest evil, may not be the greatest good. This and no other is the root from which a tyrant springs. When he first appears, he is a protector. Those who intend on becoming great should love neither themselves nor their own things, but only what is just, whether it happens to be done by themselves or others. When there is an income tax, the just man will pay more and the unjust less on the same amount of income. The learning and knowledge that we have is, at the most, but little compared with that of which we are ignorant. Nothing can be more absurd than the practice that prevails in our country of men and women not following the same pursuits with all their strengths and with one mind, for thus the state, instead of being whole, is reduced to half. We ought to fly away from earth to heaven as quickly as we can, and to fly away is to become like God as far as this is possible, and to become like Him is to become holy, just, and wise. Poets utter great and wise things which they do not themselves understand. Our object in the construction of the state is the greatest happiness of the whole, and not that of any one class. I exhort you also to take part in the great combat, which is the combat of life, and greater than every other earthly conflict. It is clear to everyone that astronomy at all events compels the soul to look upwards and draws it from the things of this world to the other. Injustice is censured because the censors are afraid of suffering, and not from any fear which they have of doing injustice. We ought to esteem it of the greatest importance that the fictions which children first hear should be adapted in the most perfect manner to the promotion of virtue. The community which has neither poverty nor riches will always have the noblest principles. I exhort you also to take part in the great combat, which is the combat of life, and greater than every other earthly conflict. It is clear to everyone that astronomy at all events compels the soul to look upwards and draws it from the things of this world to the other. We ought to esteem it of the greatest importance that the fictions which children first hear should be adapted in the most perfect manner to the promotion of virtue. To go to the world below, having a soul which is like a vessel full of injustice, is the last and worst of all the evils.